It's the Jersey Blitz, NJ.com's high school football podcast. Hello, Jersey football fans. I'm Dan Long, and on today's episode of the Jersey Blitz, I'll be joined by NJ.com football writers Ryan Patti, Donovan Hugel, Mike Kinney, Bill Evans, and Joe Zedalis. And on today's episode, we'll take a look at the team down the shore that is now healthy and playing up to its preseason potential. We'll also talk about some of the big results happening in the Big Central Conference. We'll take a look at how Don Bosco Prep passed another top 5 test, while the battle for Wayne proved to be an instant classic up north. We'll also go over some surprising records and upsets that happened down in South Jersey, while taking a listen to Donovan Hugel's interview with James Case, the head coach of Bogota. Our writers will have their weekly top 20 roundtable discussion before getting us set for some of their biggest games of Week 6. And a reminder, fans, that we want you to be a part of the Jersey Blitz going forward. So if you want to ask a question for the guys to discuss on future episodes, please send your messages on X to HSSportsNJ and have the hashtag Jersey Blitz. So starting things off on this episode, I welcome Joe Zedalis to the show. And Joe, Brick Memorial is a team that is now healthy and is making a ton of noise with big wins all throughout the Shore Conference.
Well, yes, they're starting to come back a little bit. They played without their phenomenal senior quarterback, Jason LaQuara, for the first 2 weeks of the season. He had an illness, but, last Friday night, either LaQuara or Holmdel's Jack Cannon should have slapped the other in the face with a white glove, because it was certainly a football duel. Just an incredible offensive display. The teams combined for 1,160 yards. Dan, I mean, this was like a Don Coryell game back in the 70s and 80s of the San Diego Chargers. Let them score. I want the ball. These two kids put on a show. Lahara passed for 411 yards on a 26-33 night. Cannon threw for 277. Lahara ran for 16 and 3 touchdowns. Cannon ran for 183 and scored 5 TDs. They've just been on an incredible roll offensively. Brick Memorial is the Shore's most explosive team. They returned 5 of their 6 skilled players from last season. The problem has been the consistency. Now, here's a team that scored 55 points last week, but the week before that only managed 14 in a loss to Donovan Catholic. So consistency has been the problem for Coach Walt Curry's group. Talent and ability is not. A couple other quick notes on LaQuara. This is a young man who played on the 17U national flag football team. So, flag football, it's throw every down. It's, make wild plays, get the ball out of your hand, quick decisions. So he has 1,119 yards passing. 540 of those have come in the last 2 weeks when he was 38 of 55 with 6 touchdowns. Now, again, remember, he missed the first 2 games. He's averaging 279.8 yards passing per game. So, Dan, if you add that 280 and 280, projecting out what he'd have 1,679 yards, and he would be the number 1 passing quarterback in the state for any team except Hun. So he's really been fantastic. And the Cannon kid, he almost engineered a upset of number 9 Red Bank Catholic 2 weeks ago. He's played great. I don't think either of these teams would be anywhere near in the position they're in without those 2 quarterbacks, Dan.
And Joe, we were able to see up close and personal Lahara make his season debut when we had as our broadcast that Friday night at Brick Memorial them take on Point Pleasant Borough. It leads me to ask the question of, if they had him, is there a good and strong possibility, you think, in your minds, that they might have had enough offensive firepower to take down Rumson that handled them with relative ease the week before? And then we're talking about a whole different ball game here with Brick Memorial.
Oh, agreed. I couldn't agree with you more. I think if Laquara plays against Rumson and he's at 100%, remember that would have been, one of his early games back. I don't have any question that Brick Memorial would have been in the game and I think maybe would have won it, especially when you look at what Cannon did to frustrate and sink Rumson. Laquara is the same kind of player who just makes his guys better. So yeah, I mean, as you know, Dan, we had Burke Memorial ranked in the preseason top 20, and then they took a spanking from Rumson and fell out. Like I said, when they have all their pieces, they can score points on anybody. And really, I think both Lahara and Cannon, at least in my opinion, Dan, are both our player of the year candidates and all state quarterback candidates. The thing that's unfortunate, at least for Brick Memorial, is that, they're going to end up in South Four in all probability. And then there's that team that wears green and has all those studs in Winslow, waiting for him at the end.
And I don't know if there's a better name that you could have as a quarterback than Cannon. And he's been living up to that mantra throughout the course of this season for Holmdel. So now I bring on Mike Kinney onto the show. And Mike, in taking a look at some of the things that's been going on in the Big Central, you had that big matchup between Sayreville and Piscataway living up to the hype, and as well as a game that you got to cover on Saturday, seeing a freshman quarterback leading the way for a Somerville victory over previously undefeated Summit. So talk a bit about Sayreville and having a big rivalry win against Piscataway.
Yeah, Dan, I went into the Sayreville game. This is the first time I'd seen Sayreville this season. I did see Piscataway, and I have to think, and I told everybody that I saw at the game that I believe Piscataway was probably a touchdown better than Sayreville because of their experience. They were an older team, a more veteran team, and because of the additions that they had made to their roster via transfer. I thought that they were going to be a much deeper team in the skill positions, and I thought that Sayreville was perhaps a little one-sided with Sean Jackson running the football. Splendid as he is, outstanding running back. We're talking about a kid who came into the game getting close to 3,000 cumulative rushing yards for his career. Outstanding running back, but I really thought that Piscataway with speed, both in the secondary and at linebacker, would be able to neutralize him a little bit. And I was very surprised, I have to say, because the numbers have not been great for the other guys. But now seeing them up close, the power with which these guys run, not only Sean Jackson, who can get to the line of scrimmage and get into the second phase of the defense by running people over or sidestepping people. He had a great ability to adjust his body on the run while running over one or two guys, and he did that several times against Piscataway. But I was so impressed with sophomore Dion Osei and with junior Sherwin Apaya, their ability to run the football. Those guys with running counter, they were running belly, they were running counter, they were running sweep. They were doing such a great job of keeping Piscataway off guard defensively. Line shifts on almost every snap to force Piscataway to adjust defensively. And they did such a great job of exploiting any weakness that they detected. And I tell you, I also was I held Tyler Butko, the senior quarterback, first year starting at quarterback. I was wondering about him. A little skeptical about his ability. He did a great job of organizing the offense, great job of just managing that, while those three running backs did such a great job. Jackson had his typical game against Piscataway, which surprised me, 200 yards and a couple touchdowns. But those other guys are what impressed me and what really made me believe that Sayreville right now is a team to watch. They popped in the top 20. I believe they're a team to watch now, which we're talking about a team that was only 4-6 last year. So they showed me so much against Piscataway.
And then in talking about the other game that we're going to lead you into, Somerville taking on Summit, you were lauding praise, rightfully so, in the fact that Somerville was starting a freshman at quarterback. We're going to see how he was going to fare getting into this game. Summit has been solid. We covered them in one of the broadcasts earlier this season on NJ.com in their win against Hillside. And it was Dylan Boehm who really showed tremendous poise in leading his team to a big win and knocking Summit off for the first time in 2025.
Yeah, you said it, Dan. That's the word. Poise is the word. I use it in my story, and I said it again. I think when he was one of our players of the week in the Big Central, and deservedly so. It was the poise that he showed. It was his ability to shake off trouble. It was his poise with Summit doing a great job of getting into the backfield, chasing him a little bit, but he kept his feet. He kept his composure. He found his receivers. All Matt Bloom has asked him to do, there's not putting too much on the kid. He's only a freshman, obviously. He's 16 years old. He said, just find those athletes. Just find them. They'll do the work for you. And that's exactly what they did against Summit. Here's the thing, though. On his third pass of the game, he underthrew the ball, screenplay, and Summit returned it for a touchdown. Pick six. What I'm telling you, a lot of juniors and seniors would have put their head down and said, wow, this is going to be a rough game. I don't know if I can handle it. Next series, Bohm came in and he engineered a touchdown drive, and he showed me so much by just getting back on the field and playing with confidence, throwing the ball with confidence. He didn't short arm anything. He wasn't running away from defenders. He was getting to his spot, getting his feet set, off his front foot, throwing the ball crisp. No one asked him to throw the ball long, but he threw the ball on little out patterns, on little flare outs, little screens. Get the ball to the athletes. The athletes did the job. Aiden Vesuvio Bush and James Hampton and Dario Lozano. My God, those guys can run. They can get away from people. And he just used his receivers for what they are, which are terrific athletes. They ended up running away from Summit. Second half, a close game first half, and those guys' ability to his ability to get the ball into space and those guys' ability to break away was what turned that into a 41-20 victory. So that kid showed me so much. And I understand. I don't cover baseball in the spring, but I was told by teammates and Coach Bloom that he's an outstanding shortstop. So I think our baseball guys ought to keep an eye on him for the baseball season. And the Somerville AD told me the same thing, that the kid's an outstanding baseball player, maybe better in baseball than football. So he'd have to prove that to me. But the kid had an outstanding day against Summit.
So now shifting gears up to the north in the Super Football Conference, and Donovan Hugel, a couple of big noted events. First off, Don Bosco Prep laying it on DePaul Catholic, who was the number 3 team in the rankings coming into that matchup with a newly minted number 1 ranked Ironman. Bosco pulled away in the second half after it was relatively close in the first half of play. And also, we want to talk a bit about a huge, stunning win that was produced. Vernon upsetting High Point. Touch a bit about first that Don Bosco Prep win and how the Ironmen really brimming with confidence after knocking off Bergen Catholic and taking down DePaul Catholic in successive weeks.
Yeah, I think this game for Bosco was kind of a proving ground game for them that they were still the number 1 team in the state. And it was, like you said, Dan, despite this game being close for a half, it was 21-15, and then at the buzzer in the first half, John Dever hit a 50-yard field goal, incredible kick to make it 24-15. First 3 drives of the second half, both teams are punt, punt, punt. So this game is still close, 24-15. DePaul has an avenue back in it. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, it was pretty fascinating how swiftly Don Bosco put an end to this game and how quick it was. It was about 4 minutes of game time with 57 seconds left in the third quarter, and then about a little less than 9.5 minutes left in the fourth quarter. Bosco just took over, and it was a testament again to how good this defense is. They were talking after the game about how they think they have the best defense in the state. A week after they hold Bergen Catholic to 9 points, DePaul only puts up 15. They had averaged 33 over the last 3 games. Derek Zammit, I can't say enough good things about him. He is an incredible, incredible talent. The offense around him just couldn't get going, and it wasn't because the skill position talent isn't good enough. It's just because Bosco's defense is that dominant, and they have power 4 talent everywhere. Secondary specifically was fantastic between Phoenix Evans, Amori McNeil, Jack DeMena, and Kane Ramos. Ramos had a 55-yard pick 6 early on in the fourth quarter. And going back to that, when Bosco takes over, it all started with a punt deep that DePaul had deep in their territory. Incompletion on first and second downs, and then Makai Allen just absolutely blew up Zamet, essentially right on the goal line, nearing a safety. Leads to another punt. Bosco has a long return. 2 plays later, Kasai Thomas runs it in for his second touchdown of the game. A couple minutes after that, about probably 2 or 3 plays after that, that's Ramos's pick six. 1 play after that to start off the fourth quarter is the safety, where it wasn't necessarily Bosco's defense, it was a bad snap, but all of a sudden out of nowhere, Zamet was getting mauled by probably 5 or 6 defensive linemen and linebackers. Has to throw the ball away, intentional grounding. And then a couple minutes after that, they basically add insult to injury. They bring in their entire backup offensive line. They bring in backup quarterback Dylan Rona, and he hits Isaiah Alvarez on a 29-yard touchdown. And it was that was the play that kind of really ended things. DePaul was kind of in shambles, honestly, and it was a little crazy to see how much how, like you said, Bosco is brimming with confidence right now, and the fact that they were able to put the game away that quickly. It never really seemed like the game was in jeopardy for Bosco at all, just the way that their defense was playing. Even in that first half, Zamet had 2 touchdown runs, one of them being completely dominant with a stiff arm, and then he ran another secondary player over. But those receivers just really couldn't get going. The running backs really couldn't get going. And then it just allowed Bosco's offense to get more and more comfortable, more and more comfortable. Isaiah Alvarez was great. Carson Shane threw for 200 yards for the first time in his career. And that defense really just kind of got the party started. And it started with that Allen sack about midway or a little bit more than midway through the third quarter. And then everything just kept coming from there. Like we've already talked a lot this year about how much power forward talent is on this roster and how much it's like it just keeps coming for them. It keeps coming in waves for them every single game. And they've really proven that each of the last 2 weeks, specifically this last game against DePaul. And then this next game, Vernon knocking High Point from the ranks of the undefeated. This was a game, I joked with our photographer, Scotty Faytalk, about this. This was a game that I kind of had on my radar coming into the week because Vernon's going in 3-2. They had just, but like it was kind of weird for them. They hadn't really played anybody of substance yet this year. And the week prior, in week 4, they had lost to Sparta by 14 points. And Sparta was their first big opponent this season. And then High Point's coming in. They're 5-0. They've got this great running back in Jerron Martris. They played a couple close games, but their defense has also played well. Kind of similar to that Bosco point. Like nothing has really been in jeopardy this year yet for High Point. And then all of a sudden, Vernon just proves me wrong, and they hand High Point their first loss. And it started with sophomore quarterback Nathaniel Kimkowski, who has continued to impress this year. Doesn't look like a sophomore. He accounted for 283 total yards, all 5 touchdowns for Vernon. And every time High Point scored, Kimkowski and Vernon went out and they just answered, and he led another scoring drive of his own for the Vikings. And he flipped the score. Vernon was down for the entire first half until they tied it in the second quarter going into halftime. He flipped the score with a 5-yard touchdown run in the third quarter. That was massive. Vernon then goes up by 14 points later. High Point brings it back, but then he ends the game with a 38-yard touchdown bomb to Sam Silva. And High Point came back and cut it to 7 at the end of the game, but there wasn't enough time to have that comeback. So, and then this defense did a terrific job too of limiting Martris. Martris was a very much a known name in Sussex and Morris counties coming into the year. Came into this game specifically almost 700 rushing yards, but he was held at just 76 yards on 24 carries. And you can look at that final score and say that Vernon still gave up 20 points and be like, their defense didn't play that well. But to hold a running back as physical and as fast as Martris to just 76 yards is very impressive. And it's a great side heading into their even tougher week 6 matchup against undefeated Mount Olive, who we'll talk a bit about later.
And I've seen Mount Olive in person. They are very impressive. And Don Bosco Prep, they're the epitome of being impressive so far in this season. And their gauntlet continues with another top 5 opponent this week. And bring it on to the show for the first time now, Ryan, Patti, and Ryan, you were treated to one of the best games of the year. And it was the battle for Wayne. And it lived up to the hype with Wayne Valley taking down Wayne Hills at the very end. Can you describe what that atmosphere must have been like to be at Valley last weekend?
Dan, it was unbelievable, and what an amazing game. 3,500 people there, amazing crowd, as always. Full families, always go to that game. And it just always delivers. And Friday was one of the best in the rivalry's history. Blocked field goal as time expires to seal the game. an amazing comeback. Ty Cummings, the hero there for Wayne Valley. And this is an all-time win for Wayne Valley. Jaden Cabrales, 2 long touchdowns. Eliezer Estevez, almost 200 yards on the ground. Cabrales, over 200 all-purpose yards. And the defense and special teams did their job in the second half. And for Wayne Hills, I mean, and I was very, very impressed with the Patriots. They have to be just sick. I mean, that must have been a brutal bus drive back across town. Thankfully, not too long of a ride for them, but they were up 21-14 late in the first half. And obviously you want to end the half with the ball. You don't want to give Wayne Valley a chance, but they did pocket 2 timeouts. They had to settle for a field goal. And then coming out of the half, they had a couple drops that would have went for big plays, maybe even touchdowns. 3 turnovers and plus territory in the second half. And then they had to kick the field goal at the end because they committed a false start. They actually got down to the 1-yard line with 4 seconds left, and they committed a false start. They had to settle for the field goal, which got blocked. And Dan, I really thought they could have scored 50-something points in this game and won comfortably. So it's a painful loss for Wayne Hills, but it's all fixable stuff. And like I said, I like this team a lot. I mean, a lot. Incredibly impressed with how explosive they are offensively. A lot of weapons. Love this roster. Love Coach Demikoff. I mean, he's long been one of the better coaches in North Jersey. And it's a tough one, but I think they're going to bounce back. And, I think you have to tip your cap to Chris Benaquista in Wayne Valley. I mean, talk about another coach who wins. He just wins all the time. But what a game, though, Dan, and what a night in Wayne. One of the ones for the history books.
Just an amazing football community there in Wayne, getting treated to seeing both teams being really good at the same time. That makes that rivalry even that much sweeter. And then you got to see Ryan again, Old Tappan, seeing and finding a way in a tight game. They just have the answers. They find the way to get to that winner's circle. They did so holding on late against Rampo, and they do so here against Northern Highlands. This Old Tappan side, all they do is win. They just keep on marching along here, holding on to that banner of maybe the best public school program in Northern New Jersey.
Yeah, they did it again, Dan. I mean, Old Tappan's just a machine. I don't know if I said it on the podcast, but they're almost like the public school in North Jersey, like that of Bergen Catholic, what Bergen did in their 28-game in-state win streak. Devin Radoian didn't play in this game. They had a couple other starters out, including, more offensive linemen again. And they found a way to beat a Northern Highlands team that, I mean, I've seen multiple times now, and I'm really impressed with. Defensive slugfest, 14-7. The throw, I don't know if you guys saw it, the throw from Zach Maselli to Leo Eder, just another amazing moment for Maselli where he's extending the play. He gets it to his receiver just in a spot where he can make a play on it. Great grab in the back of the end zone. Another amazing moment for them. Shane Small, another touchdown. He's up to 6 for the season. And they held Northern Highlands to just 19 passing yards. And Highlands ran the ball great. Chase Calarco, Tucker Canning, they combined for 280 on 33 carries. And I think if there's anything you can nitpick with Old Tappan, it's probably the run defense. But it didn't matter. They found a way to win again. And 11-game win streak, they're the team to beat in Group 3 again. And just what more can you say about the job Brian Dunn is doing there? Just incredible. And they have a week off now where they get to get healthy and ready for Wayne Hills. And I think Wayne Hills has a chance there. I probably won't pick Wayne Hills because I'm too impressed with Old Tappan right now. I picked Highlands last week, and that's probably the last time I'll doubt Old Tappan. But I think, Wayne Hills is a really good team, like I said. They have a lot of weapons, a lot of big playability, and they're going to have a chance in this game. I just need to probably see a little more from Wayne Hills' defense to make me think they can win that game. But, I mean, Old Tappan, they do it again. I mean, just you got to tip your cap to them.
So the defending state champs looking good there in Group 3 as we now shift gears and go down to South Jersey and bring on Bill Evans onto the Jersey Blitz. And Bill, we saw a couple of great things, starting off with a surprising record that was set by a player down in South Jersey.
Yeah, Dan, I don't think anything says, you never know what you're going to see if you go to a high school football game. Then what I saw on Thursday night, I went to cover Pittman and Lindenwold. There was only like 4 games and I think maybe in the whole state. I know just in South Jersey that night, wanted to go see a couple of the Pittman players. Lindenwold was winless this season. They were winless last season. They'd won only 3 games since 2017. 13-0, 70 seconds into the game. Lindenwold fumbled the opening kickoff. Pittman scored on the next play, then returned to pick six a couple plays later. And this was a Lindenwold team that had given up over 70 points a week ago in a loss to Kip. And all of a sudden, it just turned into this competitive game, and a senior wide receiver from Lindenwold, Charles Barber, just basically had the game of his life and the game of almost anybody's life. He did something that Latsier Brooks, our state player of the year from Millville, who's now starting in Alabama, never did. Something that Jawan Johnson and Irving Fryer, NFL players, never did. Something that no player in South Jersey history ever did. Caught 10 passes for a South Jersey record, 293 yards and 3 touchdowns. The 293 broke the record of Isaac Irby, who played for Holy Cross, and set that record back in 1999. Irby was a very good receiver himself, went on to play for West Virginia and Holy Cross. That's a record that stood, for 26 years. And, you would never expect that somebody from a program like Lindenwold, who would only, won a handful of games in the last decade, would do it. But, he caught a long 68-yard touchdown pass, then caught a 62-yarder, caught another couple passes. And all of a sudden it was a 27-22 game, and I'm double checking my history to find out, kind of confirm what I thought was the record. And he at that point had 289 yards in the third quarter. And I'm like, I can't believe this. This kid's, gonna make history here tonight. And Pittman from that point on did a great job of kind of taking him out of the game a little bit. And they kind of switched one of their senior defensive backs, Will Clark, onto him. Will Clark was born with one arm. And, he went up and they told him to jam him on every play. So, Will Clark with one arm was jamming him. They rolled some other coverages to him. He almost didn't get the record, but he caught a 4-yard pass late in the game as they were driving to try to win the game, which they actually didn't, even with Barber's unbelievable record. Pittman held on to win 27-22 because Aiden Upham scored on offense, defense, and special teams. And then Pittman wins the game 27-22. But, I talked to Barber after the game. Nobody knew what he had done except me. And when I told him, he was, I don't know that I've ever seen a kid that excited. He went over and told his whole team, and they were going crazy because, obviously this is a program that hasn't had a lot of tradition and hasn't had a lot of things go right for them. But on this night, they had a kid that set a record, for all time. And it was just kind of an incredible, very unexpected night.
For those type of stat lines, Bill, that's where you kind of say, man, I really hope that I had him starting on my fantasy team, because those are eye-popping stats. Congratulations to Barber and that amazing performance. And then in looking at some of the results team-wise this past week down in South Jersey, a couple of upsets. First off, the Williamstown shocker that you want to talk about, and then Cherokee stunning Shawnee.
Williamstown has not struggled as much as Lindenwold, and it does have a lot more tradition. But over the last few years, it's definitely been a struggle for them. They'd only won 2 games last year. They came in with 1 win this year. They were winless 2 years ago. Rebuilding under Frank Fusatola, who built their championship program. A couple of years ago before stepping down, and then the program went through a lot of turnover with basically a new head coach every year. Frank took it back over last year, and Rancocas Valley has obviously been struggling a little bit offensively since their stellar quarterback Savian Adams went out. But this was still very unexpected. Williamstown put up 21 points on what is an outstanding Rancocas Valley defense. Trey Alexander, sophomore, scored a couple touchdowns and had a really big game for them. And, they made it, and Williamstown made a defensive stop late. Really just a huge win for that program, to, kind of vault them. Now I think they jumped all the way up to 10th in the power points. That if probably they pick up another win, they'll get into the playoffs. But just really a shocking win for them, and I'll be interested to see where it takes them. For RV, it was their second straight loss. They have a big game against Washington Township this week where they're hoping to get Adams back, and they definitely need him. But I don't know that anybody saw that coming. And then, as you mentioned, big rivalry game with Cherokee and Shawnee, and Cherokee drives the ball down the field, down a touchdown, and then in the final seconds, for you Dave Casper fans out there, they basically won it on a holy roller. Cooper Birdie gets hit at the 2 yard line. The ball, it's a fumble. The ball rolls into the end zone. Cherokee falls on it for a touchdown. It's 21-20. Cherokee goes for two, and then Birdie finds Steve Barba Giovanni in the end zone for the winning touchdown with 20 seconds left. Again, another great win for a program that's not struggled as much. They've been a 500 team a little bit the last couple of years because they've been in that American division, just playing tough team after tough team every week. But that was just a huge win for them. And actually this week Williamstown and Cherokee play each other, so somebody's going to be able to build on that momentum. So just a couple really exciting games last week, and just some huge surprises from an individual standpoint and from a team standpoint.
A lot of action this past week down in South Jersey. So now we go to a new segment that we've been debuting after last week. We had the honor of being joined by Don Bosco Prep head coach Dan Sabella. This week, another proud member of the Bogota family, and this is going to be head coach James Case, who had a chance to sit down with our own Donovan Hugel for an interview to talk about his team's thrilling performance over the past week. So settle in and enjoy our interview here with James Case of Bogota on the Jersey Blitz.
How's it going, everyone? We're joined by first-year Bogota head coach James Case, whose team is coming off a wild 61-60 win in double overtime over Weehawken last Thursday night. That box score has gotten a lot of attention over the last week, but the Buccaneers are also 4-2 and playing some of their best football in 2 years. So we're very excited to have Coach Case on to talk about his team and the success that they've had so far. And in Coach Case, let's just get the obvious out of the way to start this interview off. 121 points, 61 on your side, double overtime, at home under your new stadium, your new facility. Just take us through the emotions of coaching in a game like that. What was it like, and have you ever experienced something like that before?
No, never. I've been part of some exciting games before, but never anything like that. I've been a part of some overtime games, but never like that. I was talking earlier, it was exciting, exhilarating, and exhausting all at the same time. It was a challenge. We had difficulty stopping them. They had difficulty stopping us. And it was just back and forth. It was like a top-notch prize fight. It just going back and forth, big play after big play. So it was a tremendous event to be a part of, and I'm so glad we came out.
Like you sort of alluded to, there's so much that happens in a game like that, and we can really only focus on the final score if you're not there, just because, you see 61-60 and you're like, oh my God. But I'm sure as much as you would have liked to have rather not given up 60 points, I'm also sure that it takes a certain mindset, both on the coaching staff and as the players, to continue to go back out there, keep calling plays, keep responding to a touchdown that Weehawken scores with a touchdown of your own. Was there anything that you learned about not just your team and your players throughout the course of that game, but also your coaching staff?
Well, we've always had a bit of a mantra: next play, penalty, next play, mistake, next play. You have to keep it going. You have to keep it going, and you have to continue to fight. I think we got away from that a little bit in the Park Ridge game. We kind of fell apart a little bit. But I was so proud of the kids, the way that they kept going and they kept fighting. And, and the coaches, their focus was high. The focus level of the coaches was high. And just continuing to call plays and put the kids in position to win. So, and ultimately the kids came up and did what they had to do.
And then stepping away from all the insanity that happened in between the lines of that game for a second, like you said, you have that next play mentality, kind of got away from it a little bit with that Park Ridge game. That was your second straight loss 2 weeks ago after you start 3-0. You get back into the win column last week to snap that 2-game win streak. Can you describe how huge of a win that was for your team after that 2-game losing streak? And now you're headed into a huge matchup with undefeated Woodridge on Friday night. I'm sure with a ton of confidence after posting
Mhm.
a great offensive performance last Thursday.
It was big. I mean, um, we hadn't beaten Weehawken in quite some time. Definitely in my prior 2 years of being on staff, they whipped up on us. So to see the kids fight and play and continue and to finally get a W against Weehawken, that was huge. We've put kind of our stamp on this season. We're not just the same old Bogota. I'm sure some teams come in thinking that we're the same old Bogota. We had a very, very tough loss against St. Mary's. We had the lead against Park Ridge, and this battle last Thursday. We've been playing meaningful games now, and that's part of the thing that we preach to our team. You put yourself in position to have meaningful games. It's not like we're one and whatever, and we're gonna go play so and so. No, this is a meaningful game. We're 4-2, and we're getting ready to play 5-0 Woodridge. This is a meaningful football game. Last Thursday was a meaningful football game, and they've put themselves in position for this to happen.
Has there been anything that has changed, I guess, from a culture mindset this game, knowing or this season, knowing of what you just talked about?
I think we took what Coach Appleton did, who's now the AD. I think we took what he did because he started to build that, and then we've been trying to take it up a notch. It was already started, and for this coaching staff, it's been our job to now take it to another level.
And I'm sure it is very easy for the players on the field to rally around that mindset when you have somebody like senior quarterback Jaden Gonzalez leading the way. His performance on Thursday night was unbelievable, not to be confused with wide receiver Jaden Gonzalez as
Yes.
well. But Jaden Gonzalez with a Y, your senior quarterback, 207 passing yards, 200 rushing yards, 7 total touchdowns, game-tying score in double overtime to set up the game-winning extra point. While that was his best game on paper, he's been putting up incredible numbers all year, over 1,000 passing yards, 12 touchdowns. He leads your team in rushing as well, close to 500 yards, 18 total touchdowns this year, and he's done it with so much poise. He doesn't really turn the ball over at all. What's it like having a player like that leading your offense?
It's been good because he's been a calming and a confidence builder for the offense, and actually for the team as well, because he's a heck of a defensive player. People forget that. He has a few picks. He's had some great tackles. So when the kids see him playing the way he plays, they feed off of it. They feed off of it. They're like, well, if he can make a play, so can we. We can make a play. If he's not going to give up on us, then we can't give up. So it's been great to have a kid like that.
Last Thursday, were there ever any moments in huddles where, you or another coach didn't have to go into the huddle because you knew that Jaden was going to say the right thing, or he was just like players were going to look to him and they knew that they were going to have the confidence necessary to perform in that given moment?
I'm not going to say that per se, because as a coach, you always go in.
Right.
But then I'm sure once they get back out on the field, him and the other senior leadership, they take over.
Yeah. And then for those that don't know, this is your first season as Bogota's head coach. You had been an assistant on staff for 2 years before, so this is not a totally new team for you, but this is kind of a role for you. How much has this season meant to you, knowing that it is your first year in charge, but also specifically when you take into account that you do have a winning record, you just got back into the win column, you responded really well to a loss after posting a losing record last season?
It's been fun. It's been trying at times. Early on, like back before the preseason, I used to say, sometimes I forget that I'm in charge. Somebody asked me a question. I'm like, why are they asking me? And I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. I'm the head coach.
Mm-hmm.
But as time wears on, you get I don't want to say you get used to the role because there's always new things. There's always something new that pops up. But it's been good. There's people that say to me, it's been long overdue to be a head coach anywhere. I've been coaching high school football for 30 plus years. And to have this be my first head coaching job, it's a blessing. I don't look at it as being long overdue. Some people might say that. No, it's a blessing. And maybe it was supposed to happen now, and maybe it was supposed to happen with Coach Appleton now being the athletic director. Maybe that was supposed to be the progression. So I'm very blessed. I'm very thankful. I'm very thankful for the team. I'm very thankful for the assistants. It's been good. Overall, it's been good. Like I said, it's been trying at times because that's just human nature. That's just the way things go. But it's been good. It has been good.
Yeah, it's not trying if it's a good position to have and you're on a good team with good players. And I'm sure it's very nice to have Coach Appleton still in your corner as the athletic director as well. And just to play off of that question, how much fun has it been to coach in a conference like the NJIC? It is one of the smallest small school conferences in the state. And it feels like there's a result that always catches our eye at the end of every week. St. Mary's has gotten hot as of late, which everybody's taking notice of. It also feels like there is a really good structure in place that allows for the regular season to really be valued and prioritized with there being a conference tournament. So how much fun has that been?
Oh, it's been fun. And I think that the leadership have set the leagues up to be very competitive. Our league is competitive. Yes, Woodridge is undefeated, but they've had to work for it at times. St. Mary's, who beat us, we fumbled on the one going in. Park Ridge, who beat us, but they lost to Woodridge. It's been back and forth and back and forth. Wallington is really no slouch. They play teams very, very tough. So, our league is competitive. And you look around the NJIC and you see teams within each league just beating up on each other. It's a very, very competitive football.
Well, there you have it, folks. That is Bogota head coach James Case. As we've alluded to, the 4-2 Buccaneers will travel to Woodridge on Friday night to take on the undefeated Blue Devils in the Patriot Division clash. I will be at that game covering it. Should be a very intriguing game between one of the NJIC's best offenses, obviously in Bogota, after that 61-point performance last week, and then one of the conference's best defenses for Woodridge. Coach, thank you for taking the time to join us today. Good luck on Friday, and we're excited to follow your team the rest of the way.
Thank you very, very much. Go Bucks.
So we thank Coach Case for joining us here on the Jersey Blitz, and thanks Donovan for conducting that interview with him with an amazing game that finished, again, with so many points, lighting up the scoreboard in the NJIC. So now it's time for our weekly Top 20 Roundtable discussion with our writers here, and we'll incorporate all of the guys on this one. And starting things off, when we look, Ryan, at DePaul Catholic, obviously, you have the opportunity, if you're the Spartans, if you take down Don Bosco Prep, you're probably even jumping over Heidelberg Catholic and getting into number 1 in New Jersey with the tumble now that following that loss. It doesn't mean that it's going to be no chance of staying in the top 5 or residing there later on in the season, because there's a big game looming just recently. October 17th, they get a chance to take on the Marauders of St. Peter's Prep and once again build on that resume that Coach Nick Campanelli has really been able to feast on over the last couple of seasons and make this a top 5 team again.
Yeah, Dan, I think the tumble here was necessary. This game was close in the first half, like Donovan mentioned, and then Bosco steamrolled them. I picked Bosco, but 47-15 wasn't on my bingo card at all. I mean, DePaul's defense had not got gashed like that really all year. And what helps DePaul here is that they get a bye week. They get a week to kind of pick up the pieces, dissect what happened, and also gear up for St. Peter's in week 7. And St. Peter's is also on a bye. But to me, this is a huge moment for DePaul, because not only would a loss send them out of the top 5 in all likelihood, we could be talking about them falling behind RBC in non-public B, because as you guys know, the non-pubs are handpicked. And, all of a sudden you're talking about playing Paramus Catholic in a state semis in a rematch, which could be tighter this time. I mean, DePaul was trailing in that game against Paramus Catholic in week 4 for a little bit. And Paramus Catholic looked good last week. I mean, they beat Aquinas 42-14, and that was without Marco Green, their starting quarterback. And, if DePaul's fortunate enough to advance past Paramus Catholic in a hypothetical state semi, then RBC is waiting for you in the state final, most likely. So, if DePaul can't beat St. Peter's in week 7, we're talking about not only a fall in the rankings once again, but also them having to probably have to beat both Paramus Catholic and RBC to defend their title instead of just one of them. And then, the other team I'm kind of looking at here is Wayne Hills. They were 19. They fall out of the rankings, but they see Old Tappan in 2 weeks, like I said, and, they're going to have their chance there. So some interesting things in North Jersey with the top 20. You had, one of Donovan's teams enter the rankings in Mount Olive. But what I was talking to Donovan about before we started recording here was, we might have a top 20 debate next week if St. Joe's beats Don Bosco, but that's for next week. I'm kind of interested to hear Donovan's thought on Mount Olive entering the rankings after a 5-0 start to the season.
Yeah. Speaking of that 5-0 record, I mean, obviously it can't be ignored. We had been paying attention to Mount Olive for the first few weeks of the season. Obviously, it's a program that has won a sectional title semi-recently, and a ton of people in North Jersey and Morris County have a ton of respect for. The thing that we had talked about with them was that, and like I said, they had been a team that was on our radar for a couple of weeks, was their strength of schedule. And if we just go through it, like, they beat Roxbury 35-7, and with the way Roxbury is playing, that win is aging well. But then Randolph is winless. Chatham has kind of been up and down. Morristown is 2-4. But then this Knowles game, and I think we'll be the first, like everyone on this call will be the first to admit that this is not Knowles' best year. They're still dealing with some roster turnover from last year. But anytime you beat a Knowles team and a Brian Gallagher coached team by 3 scores and they beat them 42-21, that is a win that's going to get you even more attention. And that was a win that kind of made us pay attention and be like, okay, we think Mount Olive is for real this year, right? Like I said, Knowles isn't what they were last year, but they're still a very reputable program within Morris County. And this game was also close for a little bit going into the fourth quarter, and then Mount Olive pulled away with, I believe, 2 pick sixes in the final 10 minutes. So their defense stepped up late, didn't let their foot up off the gas. So Mount Olive is a team that, they have proven their way into the top 20. It wasn't just, let's beat Roxbury, Randolph, and Chatham, and then you're in. It's, no, you're going to have to prove it a little bit more. And now it's something where the next 3 weeks they will really have to prove that they are for real and they can stay in this top 20. Next week they get Vernon, who's coming off that big win over High Point. And then after that they get Wayne Valley, and then after that they get West Morris. And there's a very real possibility if Mount Olive is able to get through these next 2 weeks unbeaten. And I think they will against Vernon. Maybe Vernon will prove me wrong again though, who knows. But that Wayne Valley win is kind of a coin toss, but if they do win that, and if West Morris goes undefeated, that's going to be a very, very fun game between 2 undefeated teams. And West Morris spent time in our top 20 earlier in the year to end the regular season at West Morris.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. And first talking about Mount Olive being able to broadcast their game against Morristown a couple of weeks ago, it was kind of the same circumstance, Donovan, that it was a close game between them and Morristown heading into the fourth quarter, and then Mount Olive just kicked it into hyperdrive and just pulled away completely from the Colonials, took care of business, flexed their muscles, and made that a bigger discrepancy than what it actually felt like it was throughout the course of that game. But Mount Olive's offense is a well-oiled machine. And in Ryan, in talking about looking at that idea of what could possibly transpire with DePaul, I was kind of hinting at it with my broadcast last Friday at St. Thomas Aquinas and doing that game with PC and getting the updates and seeing what was happening with DePaul losing the way that they were against Don Bosco. I started to even say in the broadcast, this might shake up things a bit if Red Bank Catholic continues to go at their own groove and their own pace. This might upset how people are thinking the road to MetLife runs through Alps Road, but it may be just the other way. So it's going to be very interesting. And Joe, looking at this Red Bank Catholic team that obviously we're going to be featuring as one of our games of the week this week against Rumson Fairhaven, they have so much potential there to be that top seed and make their life a little easier going forward. And now DePaul has to have a couple of hurdles in their path that may not lock them up surely as a top 2 or 3 seed.
You talked about, and so did Ryan, about Paramus Catholic maybe having a say in how things turn out. And they play Red Bank Catholic in 2 weeks up there. So, that's going to be the interesting thing. So RBC does have 2 tests to prove its worth the next couple of weeks, Dan. I just thought it was interesting because you guys really think that PC has a chance to do some damage, and Red Bank Catholic is one of the programs they can do damage to.
And you also think that somebody else could possibly be knocking on the door for a top 20 entry in the Shore?
Well, I think so. Brick Memorial has a game against Southern Regional a week from now. I had some of my guys ask me about Southern being in the top 20. Dan, Southern is 6-0 for the first time since 1974. And I was a freshman in high school, and I'm 66 years old now, so that's a long time ago. But my problem with Southern is, while they have done everything they can do, they've played the schedule they've been given. They've allowed no more than 14 points in any game with 2 shutouts. I just don't think their schedule has warranted them being in yet. They beat Highland, it's 2-4. They beat Jackson, that's a disappointing 2-4. Their best win was 34-0 over 4-1 Central. Brick Township's 3-3. They beat them. Ponderosa North is, really fallen upon hard times at 2-4. And last week they beat Lacey. So, I really feel like the winner of the Brick Memorial Southern game could push for a top 20 spot. And, we dropped Holmdel out, and it wasn't because of Holmdel's offense that scored 44 points, last week. I think it had a little more to do with their defense giving up the 55.
Do you also think, Joe, that if Rumson upsets RBC, that's worthy enough of getting the Bulldogs back into the top 20?
I think that's the only way Rumson's going to get back in the top 20, Dan, is, they're going to either need to beat RBC at home on Friday, or I think they're going to have to go on a little bit of a state tournament run, which, as we all know, they've been prone to do.
And Mike Kinney, do you feel like there was a missed opportunity by St. Thomas Aquinas that I was kind of alluding to it in the course of the broadcast, that was a chance for them against Paramus Catholic, not only to get into the top 20 with a potential win, but also to end that debate that was stemming back to last season where they felt they were underseeded in the state playoffs. If you had a head-to-head victory against the Paladins after winning at home, that could really have paid dividends for them in non-public B going forward.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question about that, Dan, and they are very disappointed over that outcome. If it's a closer game, I'd say, okay, it's still a growing thing. We're still talking about a team that has a lot of youth. I've talked all season about, the transfers, Josiah Zayas and other key guys from last year's team who are gone. They've had to replenish. They've had to restructure things a little bit. It's still a young team, sophomore quarterback Zymir Weaver, guys like that. But that is, 42-14 loss is just, that's a number. That's a game that just, they have to scratch their heads and wonder, where do we go from here? It's not so much a fact of, okay, we did this wrong and now we have to fix that and recover, come back against Edison. Right now it's like, okay, we probably need to rebuild a couple of things. We need to change some things if we're going to compete at that level. So I think there's no doubt about it that they were very disappointed. Zymir just couldn't really get the passing game going. They couldn't get the running game going at all, and that's what probably really hurt them. And Paramus Catholic was just able to control the football for so long. So they've got to come back. They'll beat Edison this week, I'm sure of that. But then they got St. Joe's. That's a game where you got to see, okay, in 2 weeks, has St. Thomas been able to make some changes that are going to help them for the playoffs? This game, unfortunately, was not a great sign for them. It kind of showed more than anything that their early part of the schedule was not terribly difficult for them, and they're going to have to show something against St. Joe's in 2 weeks.
And Mike, they seems all set out of sorts offensively, because it's very rare when you see a team commit 3 delay of game penalties. And it was just even procedurally that the coach was taking too long to get it into his quarterback and then get it into the huddle. And the crowd was not happy. Not a lot of people were happy unless you were wearing black and gold for Paramus Catholic that day. And Bill, when you look at new entries into the top 20 down south, you have Kingsway that's making their debut. And that's because the bottom of the top 20 just continues to churn throughout the course of the season. It's kind of like, hey, welcome to the top 20, and then sayonara when you see one loss and you're out.
Yeah, we've had 4 teams in South Jersey, Winslow, Washington Township, Glassboro, St. Augustine, who have been there, for the entire season. But, we started the year with Mainland and Millville in there, and then they dropped out. Atlantic City was in briefly. They're out. Rancocas Valley just dropped out with that upset loss to Williamstown. And Camden also was in, and then just lost to Winslow. They were right at the bottom, and we dropped them out, and put Kingsway in, whose only loss is actually to Camden, which was in the final minute after Kingsway was trying to basically run out the clock, needed like one more first down, fumbled. Camden was able to come back and win the game. Otherwise, I think Kingsway would have been in a lot sooner. But they've been pretty dominant since. They're 5-1. We moved Burlington Township in a few weeks ago. I think we've said all year there's maybe not a lot of great teams in South Jersey, but there's a lot of good teams in South Jersey. And when that happens, you get these competitive matchups every week. And if you're ranked down there toward the bottom of the top 20, you got to keep winning. Or you're going to fall out, and I think that's what's happened to a lot of these teams. They're kind of beating up on each other. We're churning the bottom of that, but Kingsway they're a good team. They're an interesting team. Like you said, outside of that Camden game, that they've been pretty dominant. They've got a really good senior quarterback in David Orovitz. They have a great athlete in Cole DeNick, who plays both ways, running back and linebacker. He's actually going to Rutgers for lacrosse. Is a heck of a wrestler too. And and they're a well-coached team by Mark Hendricks. So in 2 weeks they'll see Washington Township, and they're going to have to perform, or maybe that maybe that bottom of the top 20 will churn again.
So that's a roundtable discussion, as we have each and every week, looking at our NJ.com top 20. Now we get to our final segment of the episode, where we're previewing the biggest games of week 6. And Donovan, once again, Don Bosco Prep, step right up, have another matchup with a top 5 team. One of your arch rivals in St. Joe's Regional comes calling, as Bosco is going to have to go to Montvale to take on the Green Knights. How healthy is St. Joe's going to be? That's going to be the big question that everyone's going to be asking. Can Don Bosco continue to play elite level defense? And quite frankly, Donovan, at this point, if Bosco takes down another top 5 team, are they eligible for the college football playoff? Because they are just going through an insane gauntlet of Bergen Catholic, DePaul Catholic, and St. Joe's. And St. Joe's, this is an enormous game for Augie Hoffman's side, because if they fall here with Bergen Catholic still on the horizon, now you're starting to look at your potential seed in non-public A not being a sure thing as a top 4 seed.
Yeah, congratulations, Bosco. You beat Bergen, and then you draw DePaul, and then you draw Joe's, and then you get Peters on Halloween. It's like, what a gauntlet they have to go through.
It is a nightmare game of Uno for Don Bosco Prep.
It's crazy, and I didn't know this. Dan Sabella told me this after last week's game against DePaul. They're on the road for their next 3 games. So it was last week, or they're on the road for the next 2 weeks now, I guess, which is insane. But yeah, I mean, another major test for Bosco, and I guess from a 1,000-foot view, and I don't know if Ryan feels the same way, but I think that this game is going to be more of a test for Bosco than the DePaul game was. And coming into the year, I've said it before, Ryan and I were talking about it, and like, we didn't know, Bergen was obviously going to be at 1, and then was it Bosco or was it Joe's at 2? And that was the conversation coming into the year between us, because Joe's has so much talent on this team. But Bosco has obviously proven now with that win over Bergen and that dominant win over DePaul that they're number 1. And they've also proven it like at pretty much every position this year. It's like that O-line passed a major, major test last week by not allowing Logan Nagel and Jackson Passante, who had combined for over 10 sacks. Neither one of them touched Carson Shane once. And now that O-line again has to go up against the Gray brothers, Chaz and Taj, and they have to go up against AJ Ravella. And it's just going to be Logan Nagel and Jackson Pasante are very good, and it's just another test of can they do this again? And it's at every position for Bosco. It's the wide receivers. If Joe's top two players in the secondary, Jonathan Gillette, KJ McLean, if they can play up to their full potential, are they going to put more of a hurting on those receivers than DePaul did? And then, the endless question that we've talked about for 3 straight weeks about Joe's health. They had the bye week for an extra week of prep to play Bosco. Obviously, they're not happy with how that Peters game ended, and for a couple of reasons, mainly that they couldn't stop that 2-point conversion, the fumble that essentially ended the game, but also mainly that the defense had its worst showing of the season. They didn't really do a great job of stopping Peters on the ground, and that's going to be a big point for them on Saturday. Bosco has been, I would say, they haven't been bad on the ground. They definitely haven't been bad, but they've been solid on the ground. It hasn't been, world stopping their ground game this year, but it's been good enough where Dante DeLuca, Kasai Thomas have just churned yards over and over and over again, and they've moved the chains over and over again, and they really are so efficient in the red zone and in the end zone. And I'm sure Bosco is going to be completely happy to play that style of football again. And if Carson Shane plays as well as he did last week, this is going to be an incredibly difficult team to stop, especially with that O-line. But going back to Joe's health, I mean, it's going to make their life a lot easier, going to make the job of winning a lot easier if Lamar Best and Nate Bailey are back in the lineup. Like 3rd straight week, we've talked about this. Those two are going to completely change the course of how Bosco prepares for this game. If I am a betting man, I'm betting that Dan Sabella is preparing for those two to play in this game. It would be, quite frankly, dumb if they weren't preparing for those two to play in this game. So yeah, I don't know if they're going to play. We'll see. I think Augie Hoffman's holding all this pretty close to his chest. But yeah, I mean, if those two play, it's going to open up the run game a little bit more, and it's going to force Bosco to have to pay more attention to Best as he can move out of the pocket. But yeah, this is a huge one. This is a huge one for both teams.
And as Ryan alluded to, boy, would that have everything go crazy in terms of the rankings if St. Joe's knocks off Bosco, and then that on the horizon again, Bergen Catholic's going to be hosting St. Joe's in a couple weeks' time in Ordell. So anything is capable here in the Super Football Conference when those Catholic schools collide. And Ryan, Wayne Valley, you're an emotional high. You have that thrilling blocked kick at the end. You win against your crosstown rival, and now you take on, I think, maybe a public school that is being slept on more than any other in the state. I saw them in person take apart Irvington earlier this season. Ramapo is number 14, their only loss being at the last second against Old Tappan. This is a very scary Raider team that Wayne Valley is going to be taking on in Franklin Lakes later on this week.
Yeah, Dan, I think here you're looking at, between Wayne Valley and Ramapo, I think this is going to be a question of if Wayne Valley can win this game and shake up the Group 4 pecking order, because, they played Northern Highlands to an 8-point game. I think it was in week 1, and they're a Group 4 contender, the Highlanders. And it was a game where Wayne Valley very well could have won if, they had a couple miscues late in the game that kind of derailed them. If they were a little cleaner towards the end, they could have tied that game and won in overtime. And, Wayne Hills, they're a Group 3 team. They play like a Group 4 team. And I think if they played Ramapo or Highlands head-to-head, it'd be an epic game. But they're in Group 3. So Wayne Valley kind of still looking for that signature Group 4 win. And Ramapo's a Group 4 team, and Wayne Valley could see them again. And with a win here, Wayne Valley can show people, hey, we're here. We're a Group 4 contender, and we can make it to Rutgers. So that's kind of the question that I'm looking forward to seeing if it's answered here or not. But in terms of the matchup, I think you're going to see fireworks. Both offensive lines, they can create huge lanes in the running game. Both ground games are really, really good. Both quarterbacks are really good. They can hit the tight window throws that, 15-yard gain, that all of a sudden that becomes a 70, 80-yard touchdown. They can throw it deep. Both special teams have game breakers, in the return game. So you might get a lot of points in this game. And that's what happened last year. And I think both offenses are even better than what they were last year. And both defenses are better too. But to me, both offenses are what make this game's going to be fun because of the offense. And it's really just two teams that, want to put themselves in better playoff position. And yeah, I think you're going to get a really, really fun game in Franklin Lakes on Friday. Can't wait to cover it.
And Joe, I'm going to be heading down the Jersey Shore and going to Rumson, not too shabby on a Friday, as Red Bank Catholic going to be taking on Rumson Fairhaven in a matchup that I called last year at Count Basie that saw Rumson Fairhaven end a long losing streak against RBC in this matchup, in this rivalry. What are the chances that the Bulldogs go back to back and win at home to spoil what's been a marvelous season for RBC, led by two of the most dynamic freshmen in all of New Jersey?
Well, I think Rumson is really going to have to do two things. One, it's going to have to run the ball. Two, it's going to have to stop the run. Um, the Rumson defense, was really taken apart by Jack Cannon. We've talked about that ad nauseum to this point. But the other thing is that Rumson has played since the first quarter of its second game without its 1,500-yard rusher, Kellen Murray. Ryder Izzo has run for 600 yards in his stay, but, Murray's a veteran. He knows how to get the tough yards. He knows how to break tackles. But here's the thing. RBC has not allowed a 100-yard rusher in a game yet this season. Cannon came close. He had 92, but he hasn't. And the other thing, Rumson is coming off a bye, so, they should be well prepared. But at the same time, Dan, the laundry list of things that, they have to try and prepare for in this Red Bank Catholic team was monumental. It needs to get to the RBC quarterback, but keep him in the pocket. It can't get beat deep. It has to tackle well. As you saw the night you were at RBC, they love to run bubble and slip screens, throw the ball to their wide receivers and let them get yards after the catch. They have to keep freshman running back Gabe Kemp, who's 44 yards from 1,000 under wraps. And they have to do it for 4 quarters. That's the hard part. You can play 3 good quarters and have 1 bad one, and RBC is going to put you away. I think it's going to be a great game. Rumson needs to run because it's two-headed quarterback monster. They're not going to get the ball down the field, Dan. That's going to be all short and medium range passes, and play action is going to be a key. But I think it's going to be a great game. I think it's going to be absolutely packed. And I expect Murray to play, or at least to try to play, Dan.
I'm excited to call that one a big rivalry game on Friday night down at Rumson Fairhaven between themselves and Red Bank Catholic. Also, another game, Joe, that's caught your eye for week 6 involves Wall and Manalapan.
Yes, both teams have been playing real well. It's for sole possession of first place in Class B North. Manalapan has won 5 in a row, albeit not pretty all the time. And Wall has come back and won 3 in a row after losing the first 2. This game also matches Eddie Guerreri, the Wall coach, who was a longtime head coach at Manalapan, against Dom Lepore, who was his former DC at Manalapan. So I think this is going to be high-scoring football game. Manalapan scored 177 points among the Shore leaders. Their first-year starter, Junior Cameron Desfossi, has been terrific in his first season, throwing for 910 yards, 8 touchdowns, but only 1 pick. They have 2 outstanding running backs. And Wall seems to finally have its offense going. Their quarterback from last year transferred to RBC, found out the grass wasn't greener, transferred back, but he's not out. He's eligible now, but he's not going to be a starter. So Brian McKenna has thrown for 338 yards and 4 touchdowns in his last 2 games. Running back Dylan Cohen is 287 on the ground in his last 2 games. I think it's going to be a wild game at Wall, Dan.
That's going to be fun down the shore this week for some week 6 games to watch. So, Bill Evans, what are some of the games that have caught your eye for this upcoming week here in South Jersey?
Well, Thursday night there's a couple interesting ones. Timber Creek is hosting Camden. Camden coach Rob Hinson was the longtime coach at Timber Creek. Led them to 4 South Jersey titles. Coached Devin Leary there. One of the best quarterbacks in state history. just had an amazing career. They played last year in a great game at Camden, which was an emotional game for Rob then. Just seeing some of those guys on the other sideline that had been in the program when he left. And this will probably be even more so because it'll obviously be a homecoming for him. Camden's obviously we just got knocked out of the top 20, but a very strong team, one of the best in Group 2. Timber Creek's been a little up and down. They're an interesting team. You don't know what you're going to get from them from week to week. And I think it'll obviously there's a big storyline there with Hinson's homecoming, but could be a pretty good game as well. And then you also have and I love a good rivalry game, and Cherry Hill East and Cherry Hill West are playing on Thursday. East won for the first time in 12 years last year, and they're on again a long struggling program that's on a great run. They've won 15 of their last 16. They look like they're going to have their second straight undefeated regular season, assuming they can win here. West is a decent team, can probably give them a battle, but East is definitely favored, and that program's really kind of turned around under Tyler Drobb, and I'm sure next year, once the WJFL realigns, they're going to get a lot tougher competition coming off these 2 seasons that they've had, and probably be in a division again with like the likes of Washington Township and a Kingsway. But again, should be a very interesting game, and that's always one of the better rivalries in South Jersey. And then Friday, we have Washington Township RV, which is a game we've really been looking forward to since the beginning of the season. Again, we were talking about it when both those teams were dominating at the Battle at the Beach, and circling that one on the calendar. Obviously, it's lost a little bit of luster, with RV losing their last 2, but especially if Savian Adams, who's been out since pretty much that first game, if he comes back, I think that could be the great contest that we all thought it was going to be at the beginning of the season. And again, one we might see again down the road in a sectional final or in a state semifinal in Group 5, because those are 2 extremely talented teams.
And Mike Kinney, the game that you're looking forward to here in Week 6 is a game that we're going to be also broadcasting on Saturday. Phillipsburg versus St. Joe's Metuchen, with the 2 best teams of the Big Central going toe-to-toe here this weekend.
Yeah, this one's exciting. First top 20 matchup of the season between Big Central opponents, and also the only undefeated game in the state this week. The only 2 undefeated teams playing each other. So I'm really excited about that. Both teams have gotten to the same point, which is 5-0, with slightly dissimilar methods. Peaburg has been strictly on the ground. Force people, stop our running game. No one can do it. And Peaburg is averaging 39 points with basically running the ball, essentially. Their sophomore quarterback, Mr. Bracco, he has only thrown 35 passes all season. He's averaging 7 throws a game, so they do not throw the ball. Justin Scaramuzzo, a much more experienced quarterback for St. Joe's, he threw for 2,000 yards last year. He also, St. Joe's right now is pretty much running on a ground game as well. And but Justin Scaramuzzo is a proven passer in situations when they are behind and they need to throw. They just haven't had to throw. They've been doing a great job. Both teams have done a great job with clock management. So you're going to see two teams striving for the same thing, which is control the football, move the chains with the ground game. But I think if necessary, St. Joe's right now at least can throw out a little more proven passing game there. But it's going to be so interesting. Sam Deck has been outstanding running the ball for Piscataway. First guy's Piscataway. For Peaburg, you give me a P, I'm thinking Piscataway. Shane Moore, Zion McGurn, both those guys along with Sam Deck, great job of running the ball for Phillipsburg. And St. Joe's, you've got Scaramuzzo is actually their top running back. So he out of the pocket, he does a great job of running draws, scrambling when he needs to, and picking up yardage. Reggie Broplay and Dylan Pierce are going to be, it's contingent upon their ability to run the ball, because Peaburg is going to is going to focus in on Scaramuzzo. I don't know if they're going to let him get out of the pocket. So Broplay and Pierce are going to have to run the ball if St. Joe's wants to do that. Thing about St. Joe's is what they've done so well is rush the football. Tommy Kwiatkowski, Jack Cummings, and Jason Gross, even before C.J. Edwards was eligible, the transfer from Bergen Catholic was going to Tennessee, even before he was eligible, they were shutting people down, both run game and passing game. They've only allowed 11 points a game so far this season. You bring in C.J. Edwards now, and he's rushing from the edge with Jason Gross rushing from the other edge. These guys have been devastating against offenses. So want to see if P-Berg is able to run the football with the pressure that St. Joe's has proven they can apply at the line of scrimmage. And P-Berg, no slouch either defensively. You look at their linebacking core, which is Eddie O'Neill and Mike Bracco and Zion McGurn. Those guys can really hit people and get after the football. So this is going to be an outstanding game. I don't think it's a high-scoring game. I think it's a game, a little bit of a chess match that, is physically demanding. But I'm looking forward to it. I love a good defensive football game, and I think that this is what this is going to be.
Last year's matchup went the way of Phillipsburg 49-14. And St. Joe's Metuchen is going to be thinking, Mike, that they have a little bit more in the tank this year defensively. As you mentioned, C.J. Edwards being a big-time addition to that lineup. And I think you're right in terms of being able to see both teams in person this year, having covered Phillipsburg beating Westfield and then seeing St. Joe's Metuchen take down Elizabeth. I think it's going to be a case of the passing game being the difference in this one. Can St. Joe's Metuchen get it to Broplay in space and get on the board and maybe jump out to a lead to then force Phillipsburg eventually to try to throw the ball at themselves at some point in the game? Because if they just get to stay in their shell and run the football, they're going to be content with that all game. You have to make them multi-dimensional and make Phillipsburg throw the ball to have any hope against them. That's what we saw in the state finals last year that worked so well for Winslow. But again, not everybody has the same weapons that Winslow has at beck and call each and every time. That's going to be such a fun game to call on Saturday. We're looking forward to two great games here at broadcast on NJ.com. Again, on Friday night, Red Bank Catholic, number 9 in our top 20, taking on Rumson Fairhaven for supremacy in the Shore. And then on Saturday, Phillipsburg at St. Joe's Metuchen. That game on Saturday is going to be at 1. The game on Friday at 7 p.m. NJ.com subscribers can watch those games both live at game time and then anytime afterwards on demand. And you can watch all of our broadcast coverage throughout the course of this 2025 regular season on demand, again, on NJ.com/watch. And a reminder, fans, that from the open and kickoff to the end of the season, NJ.com's award-winning staff of reporters and photojournalists put you in the middle of the action for in-depth coverage of all these games that we talked about around New Jersey, including photo galleries, recaps, and stats. Be sure to visit NJ.com/HS Sports. So that'll do it for another episode here of the Jersey Blitz. I'd like to thank my cohorts Ryan Patti, Donovan Hugel, Mike Kinney, Bill Evans, and Joe Zedalis for joining us to talk everything about Jersey pigskin action. I'd like to thank our engineer, David Liss, for helping us get all sorted out. So we look forward to talking all about the action here from Week 6 next week here on the Jersey Blitz. So enjoy your football this weekend, Jersey fans, and we'll talk all about it next week here. Take care, everybody.